Well, a very warm welcome, Steph. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, three-time Paralympic medalist and world champion, semi-finalist on Masterchef, model in Vogue, vice president of UK athletics, with a Paralympic Games delayed by a year. There's an awful lot that I could ask you about here, but I will start with, how are you in these unusual times?
Do you know what? I'm doing well now. I think the first week definitely when things kind of hit home and everything went on lockdown, and it was announced that the Paralympic Games were going to be delayed. That was actually a really hard week, and it was weird because you go online and a lot of athletes were tweeting things like, oh, well, different date, same goal, not really a big deal. And I read those and I'm thinking, what are you talking? Like, a year is a massive, massive deal. And there are so many knock-on ramifications of this. I mean, it's an absolute game changer. For some athletes, it's a great thing because they've been injured. They've just come back from pregnancy. A year means a world of difference. Other athletes would have been in peak performance. You've now got these unusual situations where suddenly athletes who would have been banned from competing at the games because of drug violations now can. And people who are serving sanctions for a year, well, who cares? Nothing's on. And so there are so many things that have been affected. This is a really big deal. And for me personally, someone who is probably looking, more towards the end of her career, another year, it does make a difference, especially when you're looking at perhaps having to start looking at other career options. So for me, yeah, it kind of took about a week of readjusting, and I gave myself a week to mope and sulk and feel sorry for myself. And then it was done. And then I thought, well, there probably will be a lot of fun, undiscovered things about lockdown and new habits and new rhythms. And so let's get stuck in. And so actually, yeah, I feel kind of guilty on some levels for enjoying it, or enjoying aspects of it, but overall, really well.
Wow, so that sounds quite quick. Is that you? Is that characteristic of you, bouncing back, allowing yourself a week? Did you just box it off that way of just going, right, get it over and done with? Almost a bit like the high after a big competition and everyone has the blues afterwards. Did you just compartmentalize it like that?
Do you know what? Actually, yeah, I think it is kind of a coping mechanism that I've just sort of learned along the way. There is nothing that irritates me more than this idea of, be positive all the time and like false positivity. I'm an incredibly optimistic person, but I also think that you have to live in reality. And so one of the things that I learned when I was 15, just for my 16th birthday, and I was in an accident and I became an amputee. And one of the best things that I did naturally just to deal with that was I felt everything. And I never pretended. If I was angry, fortunately, I had an amazing family that would absorb it and would deal with it and would just let me express myself. But because I did that and I got it out, I actually was able to deal with things and move on. I never felt like I had to pretend or put on this brave face. When things were ugly, I was ugly, and that was just the way it was. And I think that just kind of carried on naturally. I think it's really important to sit with ugly emotions and feel them, because that's the only way that you're going to move on. But equally, you do have to be disciplined, and which is why, yeah, I sometimes set a time limit and think, right, you've got a week to mope around, and then it's time to start doing something.
Okay, so you allude to the accident you had when you were 15, and so if I can ask you about that in a moment, but just to finish that conversation. So you're going for the games next year, 2021. You're still going for that, and are you still able to train now? Are you still able to train adequately?
I think in this period, I don't think anyone is going to improve, and so you kind of have to adjust your expectations. And if you can't improve, the next best thing is to maintain. And yes, there's some things that I physically can't do. I don't have access to a track at the moment. I'm a long jumper. I don't have access to a pit. So that takes out quite a lot of things. But actually, the really cool thing is when you are forced into a situation where you have to be creative and change, you actually end up discovering things and discovering different ways of doing things that you never would have considered unless your hand was forced. And that's kind of what I'm experiencing. And you know, have to just kind of decide, okay, what can I do well now? And I will focus on that. And fine, I'm not going to improve my long jump technical game at this point, but there's a lot of other things that I can do. And I'm kind of enjoying them and hoping that, you know, we'll see benefits in different ways.
And how does being the airplane in the human airplane, how does that fit into your training? I see on Twitter you've been challenged to be a human airplane. Are you classifying that as some sort of core work or stability work? What's that?
So to be fair, it's probably a lot more work for my husband Brad than it was for me. But yeah, I think, you know, part of this whole lockdown is we're learning different ways of connecting and doing things. And so I have a little niece who's 2.5, Chloe. And when I was babysitting her, this would have been a few months ago, and I was visiting in Canada, we had this game called Airplane. And so my husband's a wheelchair racer. Obviously, upper body strength is pretty important. And so Chloe set down this challenge where, you know, her dad kind of lifts her as an airplane. And she wanted Brent to lift me as an airplane as well. We were slightly less successful than she was, but I feel like we put up a pretty good fight.
I love that. So that's great. And you know what? And I'm not sure that's a specific training prescription that I would naturally come to my mind. But I think what is crucial at this time is to keep people engaged, and part of that would be about variety. If you can't necessarily hit the normal training regimes that you might typically plan and periodize and so on, to challenge the body in completely different ways. And you know what? I reckon somebody's probably going to embrace that and come out the other side actually a little bit more robust, a little bit more excited, and yeah, they'd stay engaged in their sport. I was wondering how to ask you this, but you sort of alluded to your accident. So can you tell us your story? What happened?
So I grew up pretty much always wanting to be an athlete. I had always just loved any sort of physical activity. And as I kind of went through school, you know, I did all the sports. I did cross country, I did tennis, basketball, volleyball, swimming, and when I was 12, I was introduced to rugby. And I mean, I absolutely fell in love. It was unlike any sport I'd ever done. You know, just imagine being a 12-year-old girl and being given just absolute permission to let every single ounce of aggression out. I mean, it was amazing. And, but also as a sport, it just perfectly highlighted all of my abilities as an athlete. I was both fast, I was agile. I mean, I wasn't big, but I was quick, and that was my advantage. And I was a scrum half. And I kind of decided in that moment that, you know, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to play professionally. I want to represent my country. And yeah, it was just an amazing feeling. And actually, you know, things looked like they were going to fall into place. I'd been at a game, and the national coach was there, and they were really happy with what they saw, and quite impressed. It really did look like, okay, like this is the start of everything that I want coming true. But a few months later, in the summer, I was up at a friend's cottage. We had a bank holiday weekend, and their cottage was up on a beautiful lake. And they had a boat, and we would do this thing called tubing, which is where you attach an inner tube to the back of a speedboat, and you know, you just go flying across the water. And I mean, it's super fun. And we were doing that all weekend. And then the morning before I was going to get picked back up to go home, we thought, well, we'll just do it one more time. And unfortunately, this time you know, you fall off the tube because you hit waves and stuff like that. And so I was in the water, and I was waiting to get picked back up again, like I always did. But when I look back, I knew something was wrong because the boat was coming way too fast. And I just thought, you know, he doesn't see me. And you know, it's amazing how, you know, your brain works, and you just flip into survival mode, and everything was super clear. I knew exactly, you need to miss the propellers. that's what you have to do. And so just, in a matter, a split second, I was assessing my options. I actually was a really good swimmer, but I knew I didn't have enough time. It was a big boat. There were probably about, I don't know, maybe 12 people on it. And I didn't have enough time to swim side to side because I would still get kind of sucked into the wake and pulled into the propellers. So I thought, that's fine. I'm going to surface dive. I will get below the boat. I'll wait for it to go over top of me. And that's it. I'll be fine. So I went to do that, but I just totally forgot I had a life jacket on and I couldn't get under. And I mean, the clips and the zips, there was just no time. And in that moment, you just think, you just hope for the best. And it's weird. There's like a period of, I remember everything. And it was just this period of just darkness. I don't really remember what happened or what went on. And then I felt like my lungs were going to burst and, you're desperately trying to orient yourself and get back up to the surface. And I surfaced again. And it was weird. I didn't feel right, but I didn't know why. And I couldn't really work out what was going on. But I was very lucky to have survived that. But unfortunately, the propellers had caught me across my lower back and on my right leg. And it was quite serious. We were hours away from a half decent hospital, and I was a lifeguard. I knew immediately that is way too much blood, and that was quite scary. But the worst part was coming out and seeing this really mangled limb, and knowing that you would never run on that again.
God. So you're describing that. You almost have like a logic to it. You describe this sort of your feelings, your assessment of the situation, what you're going to do to troubleshoot it. Was how your mind was at that moment, just beforehand, that you were thinking clearly and logically about the situation and how to solve it?
In some senses. I think you're probably giving me way too much credit right now. I think the two things that the biggest thing I learned about that accident was actually how amazing your body is, and how amazing your mind is, and how it will just naturally compartmentalize things for you that you're not capable of dealing with. When I go and I love getting the chance to go into schools and speaking to kids, particularly around the ages of 8, 9, 10. The questions they ask are great because they're so insightful and they will ask anything. Everyone else is too polite. But invariably, the one thing the kids are concerned about the most is, were you in pain? Were you in pain in the accident? Are you in pain now when you walk? That's the number one question by far, which is really sweet. And I think about it, and I was never actually in pain at any point. It was almost just like it was too much for my brain to handle, that it just shut everything off and everything down. Your body goes into shock. I mean, the pain that I feel when I stub my toe is infinitely worse than anything I felt that day, which is crazy to think about. And again, I don't think it was anything to do with my ability to cope. It's just what your brain does when you get put into survival mode.
And so you're talking there about not being able to almost receive the feedback of pain, but then you reference the image of seeing your mangled limb. And so you felt the shock and the pain of that too.
I did. I mean, it was a very, very strange, it was just a strange day all in all. And actually the funny thing is, just the aspects of yourself that come out. I remember, this is actually really embarrassing. So what they did was, obviously we weren't near a hospital. So they, there was an ambulance. They took me to, this tiny little clinic that really couldn't do anything for me. I mean, I needed a blood transfusion. That's what I needed immediately. And I can remember yelling at this junior doctor. I had a huge gaping wound kind of across my upper back and just both glutes. And that was a big problem as well. And there was nothing they can do. And this guy started duct taping it. And I remember just tearing him apart and being like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you went to medical school. This is the fucking best that you can do. Sorry. And this is the best that you can do.
Let it all out.
But and so it was just this really, really strange mix of emotions. You kind of float into and out of it. But again, after the accident, after the pain, you know, it's those 2 weeks afterwards where things kind of start coming back. But if nothing else, I did learn that actually I can trust my body, and it has an incredible ability to cope when I can't.
And so you've mentioned there that you emotionally let it all out, and you had an amazing support network of people that were there for you at that time. How did you process the prospect of losing a foot, a limb, and then starting to think about moving forward? How were you mentally in that period of time where there's a decision made, but you're alive, you've survived, you've got people around you?
I think actually the key was what you just said. It's actually the people around you. It's not something that you can do on your own because you're just not capable. You're almost stuck in this hole and you can't see anything around you, and you need the eyes of other people. When I kind of knew all along they're not going to be able to do anything for that leg, but it was the moment when my mum came into the recovery room, actually. So I was unconscious, and I wasn't the one making any of the decisions. And I woke up in this recovery room, and I was so thankful to still be alive because I knew how close it had been. And but when my mum came in to say, they did everything that they could, but they couldn't save your right foot, and they had to amputate. I mean, that was devastating because I knew in that moment life is never going to look the same. There is no going back. At 15, like, that was my life stream. That was now no longer a possibility. What do you do? I love sport. I couldn't even imagine a life without it. I didn't know if I wanted a life without it. And so that was tough. And that first week I was not happy. You can sense when someone has, they're kind of slipping into that area of, I don't even want to try anymore. Like, I just don't care. And that's kind of where I was. I mean, also I was on a lot of medication. And so it's tough to process things then as well. But, I wouldn't eat. I didn't want to see anyone. I refused visitors. I was just not a nice person to be around. And I'll never forget 7 days later, 7 days after the amputation, I would describe my life changing again for the second time. And it was a nurse who walked in and basically wasn't having it. She came in with breakfast, and I just did my usual, like, I don't want to eat, and she said, well, why don't you at least get up and shower? And I'm like, you know what? I just don't care. And so I kind of pretended to sleep, hoping she would get the hint and just go and just leave me alone. But instead, she, just put the tray down on my bedside table and got really close and just said, politely, but also really firmly, Stephanie, that's enough. Like, you have got to start doing something. And I can't remember the rest of what she said, but I just remember in that moment, one, being shocked, because, I was sad and I was injured, and how could she talk to me like this? But also, it was just, she was the first person that had walked into that room and not felt sorry for me and was simply not going to accept moping. And she was the first person to really challenge me. And actually that felt really good. And it just kind of sets on this, it set me on this course of remembering how much I love a challenge, how much I love working towards something. That was why I love sport. And it was in that moment that I realized, I was still the same person. I could have lost every limb on my body And I still would have been the same Stef. I still would have been the Stef that wanted to, train really hard and loved competing and loved giving her best. And I just realized I was still that person. I was probably going to have to find a different outlet for it now, but that was okay. But she just kind of reignited in me that desire. Actually, I want to keep fighting. This isn't what I chose, and this still really sucks, but I'm going to make the best of it.
Wow. So you took 7 days to get over the Paralympics being being delayed. You took 7 days for somebody to kick you up the backside. I mean, that sounds like a voice that you just needed at the right moment, but probably somebody who has been there and done it and seen every possibility in medical care, and probably saw the potential in you that's what you needed, that you to snap out of it. And how did you then respond? What were the first moments where you started to think, I'm going to get my teeth stuck into this?
Well, I ate everything on that plate for breakfast that morning. She came back and I wanted to make sure she saw that. I had a shower, which, it's all contextual. That was a big deal in that moment. And, you kind of have to start with baby steps. And again, it was just this idea of working at, okay, like I have a clearer vision of where I want to be, 3 years from now, but what will that look like today? And I mean, it was infinitely small things, things that probably wouldn't mean anything to anyone else. Like just sitting up for 5 minutes. One of the things an amputation does is it just really affects how your blood travels back to your heart. And, sitting up is just, it's actually painful. It gives you a lot of just different pressure sensations throughout your head that aren't great. And so, just really small things. And I think the game changer was actually just being able to experience and realize those moments of joy. And things that in another scenario you wouldn't even flag as being a situation that could be remotely joyful. But even like, I'm only giving this for context. People understand just what that can look like. One of the big concerns and one of the things that would have been a really big issue was how the propeller nicked my colon and caused damage. And nobody was really sure. And so actually, in the moment I did my first poo, was a really big deal.
Yes.
And, we celebrated. And of course, that sounds ridiculous, but I just think in every scenario that you have, as soon as things change, you can't keep applying the same standards that you use in a different situation. And so you have to be agile enough in terms of how you're setting your goals, how you're evaluating them, to actually match the new situation you find yourself in. And actually, to be honest, that's probably true for everybody who's in lockdown right now. The whole world's going through this pandemic. If you keep judging yourself by the standards you had, 6 weeks ago, it's just not going to work, and it's not great for your mental health.
Okay, so besides the fact that it was about having a poo, is to step out of that scenario, what you're focusing there, or it seemed as though it helped you appreciate what you had, but even though we're quite hardwired and sensitive to the things that we've lost. And it's interesting now you're referencing this idea of loss. People talking about stockpiling at supermarkets and how ridiculous that is, but actually having read about some of the clinical psychology, what's going on there is that when people are faced with loss, that they search for things that they can focus on that is a gain. So it sounds like in a similar situation that you're celebrating those moments, that you're taking the joy in them.
Definitely. And actually it was a joy that was key, because it's the joy that that almost stops that fear. And so a lot of, the more negative habits that we form in order to find security, they're because of fear. Whereas actually when I reached that moment when I knew, okay, I have no idea what the next 4 months, the next year is going to look like. I had never even met an amputee. I knew nothing about the world of disability. And even though there were still so many unknowns, I still had, I had found this deep sense of security. I will be able to deal with it. No matter what comes, I will be able to deal with it. And for me, that was definitely the game changer.
And how was that in terms of going back out into school or society and so on, and recreating your new identity? Because you'd grown as a rugby player and as a friend to your schoolmates and so on. And how was that reintroduction?
That was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. And you're right. I think it was the loss of identity and having to figure out, I don't know who I am outside of sport. And so the accident happened at the beginning of August. And originally I was going to take the semester off school, but I just thought, I'm so bored. I just want to go back. So I ended up going back quite early in midway through September. And just, I was genuinely fearful I was going to show up at school and my friends weren't going to like me anymore. My teachers weren't going to like me anymore. My coaches weren't going to be interested because I had nothing to offer. I couldn't win games. I wasn't a good athlete anymore. I was just this person going around on crutches. You can't get an artificial leg for several months after until the skin heals. And so it was actually just walking in and being prepared. You know what? It's possible no one's going to like you anymore. And it sounds like a ridiculous thing to be afraid of. And there's no way to make it easier. You just have to walk through it. And I remember meeting with my prosthetist for the first time, even though he couldn't make a leg. I remember going in and just pleading with him. I know you can't make me a leg, but can you just fashion some sort of foot that I can just kind of attach to the end of my stump. That way, when I go out, to the mall, when I'm out in public, people just won't keep staring at me. And he was brilliant. He looked me in the eye and said, Stephanie, I could do that, but I'm not going to. You need to accept this is who you are now. And I think it's better that you learn to deal with it, which sounds incredibly harsh. And, it was. And I think it's so simple for you. Why can't you just do it? But, he knew. He's been there before. He's seen this. He knew that it's important that you are proud of who you are as you. And even just some of the things that my mom, we would go to the mall. The mall was great because it was a super flat surface. I could get around on my crutches reasonably easy. And my mom said to come one day. I'm like, oh, Mom, I don't want to. I'm just so sick of everyone staring at me. And she was like, well, yeah, your hair looks awesome. Why wouldn't they be staring? But again, it was just this idea of get over yourself, as though you assume everything and everyone cares about you and your amputated foot. Probably no one cares. They're looking at your hair. And it was great, again, just to have those just adjustments made in terms of perspective. And again, that goes back to, it's not something you can do on your own. We are all so navel gazing. It's so, so important that we have people around us that will just give us insight into our blind spots. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in them for the rest of our lives.
You've got, this is in Canada at the time.
Yes. So actually, people are probably wondering, that's a very strange accent. The accident happened in Toronto, Canada.
I'm just thinking about the hardcore medical staff there, that resilience training staff. They know, the nurse, just get up and get showered, and prosthetists go, no, tough it out. There's some tough loving going on to get there, and that's a brilliant reframe of focusing on your hair versus your leg.
My mum is incredibly wise. I mean, she has had moments, like that, where she just comes out with absolute gems.
So do you think this was in you, this reserve and this resolve and resilience and any other R word I can think of? Did you think this was there? It just needed triggering from other people? And have you seen other people respond in a similar way to similar experiences? Or has this harnessed what was already there within you?
I think so. Since becoming an amputee and having way more involvement in the world of disability than I would have previously, I've noticed events like this. There's no middle ground. You either come out, just with a new zest and appreciation for life, or you go the other way. And there is bitterness and there's despair, and there doesn't seem to be a middle ground. And these events tend to be really decisive and divisive. And I mean, if you had asked me as a 14-year-old if I could have dealt with this, no. But I just think that there is, again, I think every single human I don't think there's anything that special about me when you are put into a scenario where you have to show up. I think by and large, we do, as long as we give into it and just kind of open ourselves up to it and plod through and just say, okay, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but every day I'll take the next step and I'll ask myself, what is the next best thing that I can do? Yeah, I think every single human is capable of doing this. And we see this, all the time, a variety of difficult situations. I'm actually reading a book right now about Auschwitz and just the way people stepped up in that scenario. So no, I don't think it's special or confined to one individual. I think we're all capable.
Oh, can you tell us the book?
It was The Librarian of Auschwitz.
Oh my goodness. You have that, you use the word there, zest, and that seems an effervescence from you about your experiences, but also how you rationalize it. And this doesn't necessarily follow the timeline of your experiences, but when did you start to make sense of your experience? I guess once you're in it and it's quite visceral and you're feeling those ups and downs, it would be difficult to step out of that experience. But when did you first start to contextualize it and appreciate it for what it is?
It was, okay, I feel like I've probably made it seem like I got over everything in 7 days on the basis of that nurse, which is not true. That was a start.
7 years, maybe?
Yeah, that's probably more realistic. I mean, the actual process, yeah, I would probably say between 4 and 7 years. As probably confident and happy as I was outwardly, there was still a lot of things that I kind of needed to sort out in myself. And so I think initially, for example, I thought the best way for me to succeed as an amputee was to basically fool everyone into thinking that I wasn't one. I walk incredibly well. If I was wearing trousers, you probably wouldn't even know that I was an amputee. I mean, I had friends in university who I'd known for, a couple years who had no idea that I had an artificial leg, because it was something that, I was still processing. I was 16 years old I was 15 years old, just about to turn 16. And, already, you've got a teenage daughter. It's a really difficult period where, you're transitioning and trying to, body image is a really big thing. And, suddenly you realize, wow, I'm never going to look like anyone in these magazines. And how do I feel about that? How do I feel about living in a society where people are not going to value me in the same way they're going to value people who have 4 limbs? Wow, what's dating going to look like? Is it something that I even want to get into, or is that just going to be too awkward and too hard? And so, yes, you have all these things that you are worried about and afraid of, but equally, you actually end up finding all these other great things. Like, for example, okay, society is not going to accept me. And suddenly, then you're free. You can just check out of all these ridiculous rules and just not care. And you get this amazing sense of freedom that you never would have experienced when you're trying really hard to show, wherever you're on social media, you have it all together. And so with everything, with every negative, there was a really great positive. And that's probably just the way most life is. And so I was experiencing all these other great benefits. But there was a moment when, and I think it was a moment where I actually finally realized, you know what, I am different, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. When I first became a para-athlete, I ended up going back to school and studying biochemistry, and then just ended up kind of finding my way back into athletics. And it was before London 2012, and I had no expectation of being any sort of athlete that had any sort of sponsorship. And I remember, being invited to go and speak with a rep from a company who was looking for other people. And, you're there and you're looking around and you're looking at other athletes that and that, were able-bodied and great. And you start feeling really small and start feeling really silly and insignificant. But then there was this moment where I thought, no, I'm not going to accept that. Actually, for someone at the same level of me with the same experience, I am automatically more interesting for having an artificial leg. And that was the first moment where I realized, actually differences can be, superpowers. That is what is engaging. And I will never again look at this as something that's negative, because if I feel negatively about it, everyone else is going to as well. I dictate how other people feel.
Oh God, there's so much in that I could ask you about. The freedom and the exploration, or understanding your situation, and that superpower, which makes me think of the Channel 4 advert that was so significant at the time. But how amazing was it to be thinking, I'm never going to be like those people I see in a magazine, and then become one of those people in a magazine. I mean, something like Vogue. I mean, as much as some people might be listening thinking, oh, well, that's not what you do for a living, but you're being celebrated for who you are. How did that feel like a moment where you were coming full circle?
It totally did. I
Wow.
mean, yeah, seeing that in the magazine for the first time, and yeah, it really was. It was something I never expected to happen, and actually, it happened not by me trying to be someone that I wasn't. It happened by me just being me.
Wow. And so, and that moment of feeling, no, I'm infinitely more interesting. I'm not sure you said infinitely, but you probably are. But that moment of thinking, this is a unique feature and it's a super strength of mine. Was that propelled by this wave of interest around 2012, and we had Nick Diper on the podcast a few months ago now, but just feeling that step change of the Paralympics didn't have that international prestige and interest and audiences. You had a big stadia, but not full. And then suddenly at 2012, it was. How did that feel at that moment?
I mean, that was such a dream come true to witness and to be a part of that. One, not only a home games, but also now that was the Paralympics that changed everything. Um, and yeah, it's so much easier to take on feelings of belief and feeling good about yourself when the public do it as well. Now that can never be your crutch. You can never be dictated to by what society thinks of you, but it certainly helps. And that was a game changer for a number of young disabled children who now would have grown up seeing sporting heroes with disabilities on TV, and that was a big deal. And I remember just really having that hit home for me when previously when I was training and I would go to the gym. People were always really supportive, but it would be more of like, oh, that's so sweet. Look at her working out. Good for you. Whereas after London 2012, I would go to the gym and, men would be asking me for tips on how to squat, a female with an amputation, which was just crazy. So yeah, I mean, let's not paint too rosy a picture. There's still work to be done. There are still huge amounts of difficulties for people that are different, have different disabilities, different ways of doing things. But it definitely got that conversation rolling, and definitely as a society helped us value different ways of thinking and different ways of being.
And I don't know the most appropriate way to ask you this question, so feel free to bounce this back and ask me to have another go. But in terms of that interest, how much of that is that you're understanding and recognizing that my story is defined by the adversity and the experience that I've had and the horror of the situation, versus how much your own opinions and thoughts and ideas and identity is wrapped up in what you have to say and how you've experienced athletic work and how you've thrived under this pressure. I'm not sure that what the question is specifically, but it's about you put a hero up as a public speaker and they'll say, oh, I tried and then I succeeded and here's the gold medal at the end of it. Yours has a different dimension of that. How much is that something you cherish, or how much is that something that you'd actually want to push to one side and tell the human story?
I think that's a great question, and I think I do understand where you're going. So, for example, I sometimes work as a broadcaster for Channel 4, and we're constantly having this debate between, okay, so when we are doing Parasport, how much do we focus on the story and where they've come from, and how much do we focus on the sport? And are we devaluing their performance as athletes by focusing too much on the story? And my position has always been, we are human and we are multidimensional. The story matters, and it is part of it, and it's part of what people will relate to. And equally, this is me putting on a very practical and realistic head. Why would somebody want to watch somebody in the Paralympics run the 100 meters in 11 seconds when they can watch it in the Olympics and run it in 9:6? What is the difference? And for me, that story makes a big deal. It does not mean that we devalue what they're doing as athletes, but it is the whole package wrapped together. Now, where I draw the line, it's going to sound weird to say, but do you know what? I love my artificial leg. It's amazing. It fits really well. I'm unbelievably lucky in that I have what is called a fantastic stump, in that it gives me very little issues. And it's very rare for someone who had a traumatic amputation because you can't plan it. So when it comes to my artificial leg, I love it. I love showing it off. I purposely now get carbon fiber sockets. I used to always think, oh, I want one that looks really lifelike. I'm like, that's stupid. Carbon fiber is cooler. But equally, my artificial leg is not the most interesting thing about me. And when that line starts getting crossed, that's when I have an issue.
Oh, and that's obvious from the first moment I spoke to you, in that sense of the articulation of your experience is richer. And I'm asking you more about that than the details of walking, etc. That's fascinating. So you've gone through that thought process of asking questions that people are interested in one side of the story, but ultimately it's integrated. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yes, 100%. And I think even, I've watched able-bodied sport, and I've watched Parasport. And, some people, for us, well, hang on, I'm not speaking on behalf of all para athletes. I'm going to speak on behalf of me. So occasionally I will compete able-bodied, and it's simply a case of there's just more competitions there. But I don't see, I don't see Parasport as the ugly stepsister to Olympic sport. I see them both on par. They're different, but they both kind of sit on the same level. And the difference for me is when you go to a sporting event like the Olympics, it's amazing. It's an amazing showcase, but often it is people in the audience watching these really amazing people have these moments. Whereas in Parasport, it's this incredible, I don't feel like the audience is watching. They are involved, and they're actively realizing that even if they feel like they're underdogs, they can still do amazing things as well. And so it is just a totally different feel. They are the same and they are different.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. I mean, I think about long jump, and I think about Mike Powell and Carl Lewis struggling against each other in 1991. And I think about the human rivalry, and the fact that it was at the level of the world record and setting a new world record is sort of irrespective, because if I wanted to watch things leaping further, then I'll watch kangaroos or so. It's about the people and relating to that and how they respond to that situation. Yeah, interesting. And you mentioned they're not speaking on behalf of the Paralympic community. That alludes to there's a variety of different views there that you don't necessarily adopt, or could you allude to what those other views might be? Are people more entrenched of saying, actually, it's just about parasport for me, I'm going to just focus on that?
Yes, I think that the reason why I have huge hesitation about ever pretending to be a mouthpiece for all people with disabilities is because there is just such a huge and vast range of experience. So I remember, 10 years ago, I would, go up and down the country telling kids, you can do anything you want with a disability. And I realized on, a trip to Nepal, I had not been telling the whole story. Life is very different when you have a disability, depending on how much money you have. And yes, I'm in a very lucky place where I have access to all sorts of limbs, and that is not the case for everyone. So that was something that I had to really quickly look into and adjust, because there is not the same treatment for people with disabilities across the UK or across the world. And I guess the second thing is again, there's huge differences whether or not your disability is visible or invisible, or whether it's considered, cool versus less cool, which sounds weird to say, but I mean, that's reality. I, for example, have a disability that can be very visible, or very invisible, depending on whether or not I'm wearing trousers or the scenario. I'm married to another Paralympian, Brent Lakatos, and he's a wheelchair racer, and he uses a wheelchair in his daily life. And, the things that I've occasionally witnessed, the way people respond to him, you're just kind of like, wow, that's really weird. And again, there are other disabilities where, I just don't have the experience of knowing what that's like. So that's why I'm hesitant. That's why there is such a range of views, and they're all valid views. I can't say them because they're not mine, but equally, that is their experience and that is their reality. And so it matters that we have a variety of opinions and voices speaking into the situation.
Hmm. Now, I've impatiently jumped ahead because I'm curious and interested, and it felt right to ask you those questions at that moment. But can I just take you back to that sort of moment you first ran with an artificial limb, and how that felt again, because you mentioned zest, and it sounded like that zest and inspiration and aspiration to be a rugby player, an athletic. How did that feel? How did that happen first? And then how did that feel?
Actually, if I'm really honest, it was crushingly disappointing. There's so much zest in that moment.
I imagine this breeze in your hair, and you're just thinking, I found it again, and I'm back there. Go on, tell me.
I did too. Why don't I start? Well, actually, I'll start with the moment that I walked again for the first time. And I remember because it was the first day I was having my walking leg. I was going to go pick it up. And I put it on, and we did a little bit of walking, and it's not like you put it on and you walk off. I still had crutches because you're just teaching your skin and your bones to tolerate the pressure again. And it was really cool though. And I looked down, and suddenly there were 2 feet. And my mum then had to drop me back off at school. And it just so happened the time to drop me off, there was a huge school assembly going on. And so I went to join them, and I was just so desperately trying hard to sneak into the back of the auditorium, and no one noticed. But the moment I opened the door, everybody just, turned around and just literally stood up and started. I mean, it's actually making me tear up now. And just, they just stood up and all started, clapping, and just so happy for me. And that was that moment of just, wow. That was really awesome. But back to the rugby moment. I was kind of expecting that again. And it was almost a year after the accident where I stepped back onto the rugby field. And of course, I had these visions of I was going to be unbelievably fast. I was going to be top scorer. I was going to be amazing. And it just wasn't like that. Running was very different to walking. It was painful, to be honest. A lot of force goes through your body when you are trying to sprint on it. And again, the feet are amazing because you have this special kind of skin on the bottom. You have this amazing bone structure that is able to dissipate that force. Whereas I was essentially running on the bottom of my tibia and fibula on heel skin, which is super thin. And it was just flat out painful. I could last for about 2 minutes. And even then, I used to be able to run end to end on the field, darting in and out of players. And I was just getting slammed to the ground because in my head, I could still do it, but my body, it just wouldn't. And that first game ended up with me, getting pulled off by my coach because she could just see I was in too much pain, and basically just storming to the end of the field and crying behind a tree. So yeah, 2 big differences.
I'm just thinking in one moment, how cool of your cohort in that moment as you walked into that assembly room and clapping you and welcoming you back in that moment. Kudos to them in that time to respond in that way. And then I'm also just thinking, slamming an amputee to the ground at their first rugby match back. It's another bit of tough love. What's going on?
Yeah, nobody felt sorry for me.
And then so, how was your journey back to, or discovering that you could have a road towards being a sprinter again? And how did that start? And how did you start to respond?
To be honest, actually, that experience on the rugby pitch was actually kind of confirmation that, okay, sport might not be the avenue for you. And that happens sometimes in life. You have to adjust. I knew that I was probably going to make a terrible waitress. And so I needed to study. And it was actually in that moment that I decided, okay, well, all this energy and all this effort I used to spend on sports, I was always pretty academic. I'm just going to apply it to school. And I chose a new goal. My surgeon was amazing. They brought him in from holiday to work on me just because I was young and, had a great chance to hopefully survive. And I thought if I can do that for someone else, that would be, a life well spent. So that was my new goal. So I studied really hard and ended up getting a full academic scholarship to study biochemistry at Queen's University in Canada. And I wrote my MCATs, which in North America, you have to write an entrance exam in order to be considered for medical school. And that was my new plan. That's what I was going to do. And it was kind of within that time frame. So also, that experience of huge amounts of pain when I was running. Initially, for the first 2 years, I really could only run maybe once a week for about 30 minutes pain-free. But the reality, and it was a case of I just loved it so much. I was willing to put up with that. And gradually over time, my body adapted to the point where about 4 years later, actually I could comfortably run and do 2 training sessions a day. And so these 2 moments of just about to start this journey onto medical school while at university, and also being, finally given a proper sprint blade, that kind of happened at the same time. And I've been running and doing my thing, just loving it and thinking, well, my times are okay, but they're not amazing. And then realizing, oh, actually, I've just been running on the wrong blade. And actually, I am quite good. And actually, I am now in a position where I can get fit again and really commit to this. So it was just kind of a strange, messy path that I walked away from sports and then obviously couldn't stay away and kind of just got thrown back into it. And then I had a decision to make. Okay, well, are you going to pursue medicine, or are you going to try this ridiculous dream of being a sprinter with only one foot? And you have to bear in mind that as I'm telling my family this is way before people even knew what Parasport was. And, people thought, you're nuts. Like, there's no future in this. But it was a weird one. So equally, I knew medical school would be hard. But I knew I could do it. I knew I'd be capable. I knew I would finish. I had no idea if I could cut it as a para athlete. And I just thought, well, look, I've got to try. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And then I go to medical school 2 years older. There's no big deal. So I just thought, well, I'm in. And I am definitely that person that I don't have a middle ground. I'm in or I'm out. And I was in and I pursued it. And I went to the Beijing Paralympics. And I thought, yeah, I definitely want to be there in 2012. And that was the start.
Wow. And so you're speculating hugely there, but it sounds to me as if the challenge aspect of it was almost the bit that made you excited, that without disrespecting any of the medical community, we certainly don't need to do that at the moment, but you're almost thinking, well, I could do that. I can see that I would achieve that, but I don't know whether I could respond to this. And was that part of the motivation?
Oh, it totally is. So if
Wow.
I have this feeling, I have this sense of myself where if something scares me, it also intrigues me. And if I feel myself wanting to say no out of fear, that automatically then makes me want to say yes, just to see. And I mean, it will crop up in the most ridiculous of scenarios. So in 2017, I had an opportunity to star in a short film. And part of me was just like, oh, like I can't act. I don't know how to do this. And the director, the way it worked out though, the funding was tied to me starring in it. And the director said, no, it's fine. We will go through acting lessons and we're going to do this. And I was terrified, but equally it was a terror that thought, yeah, but I kind of want to know if I can do this. And so, yeah, you're 100% right. I think the fear kind of intrigues me.
Okay, so that's leading to me to ask, and I should be asking you about sport and jumping and stuff, but I'm not going to as much. But so you seem to have a number of different aspects to your career, and you've been on MasterChef, you've modelled, you act in a governance role at UK Athletics. I'm imagining what next might scare you, and I've discovered that you act. So how important is culturing the non-sporting interests to you at the expense or potentially the balance of you pursuing another medal achievement at the Tokyo Games? How do you balance that and follow your instincts, but also stick to what you're doing well?
That's a great question. So I believe my coach, Aston Moore.
I love Aston Moore.
He's awesome.
Who doesn't?
So Aston is an amazing coach. And you are right. At this moment in my life, I am 100% committed to my athletics. And I don't think Aston is the kind of coach that would accept anything else. We are committed to excellence. We are committed to making me the absolute best long jumper that I can be. That being said, Aston has a phrase which he uses called positive distractions. And so he actually, from a performance perspective, is a strong believer in developing people both on and off the track. Because look, when you are under pressure, you automatically revert back to who you naturally are. And who you are shows up in every aspect of your life, not just on the track. And so it's about practicing and engaging things, through all aspects of your life. And part of the reason Aston is an amazing coach, it's a given that, he's great technically. He's great at, periodizing performance. Any coach can do that. The difference is someone who can build a fantastic human being.
Positive distractions.
So basically, Aston knows he has permission at any point in my life to say, like, Stephanie, I think you're neglecting some aspects of the track. It's interfering. The moment Aston says that, then I pull back. But it's great. We have a kind of relationship where that is possible. A time will come, when I retire from athletics and I move on to other things. And yes, it is a balance. It probably does sound at the moment like I'm balancing tons of different plates at one time. But actually, by and large, my philosophy in life is, do fewer things better. And so it's just, I don't do all these things at the same time. There are just certain high intensity periods in different areas. But I should actually clarify. I'm a big believer in if you want to be great at something, you've got to give it 100% attention.
So I like that in that sense of giving you the non-sporting aspects of your life a spring in a step. So you've got excitement that draws you out of bed in the morning rather than dreading necessarily the same training. But the training is one part and the recovery is another, and your nutrition, which you're clearly expert at. But also I've got these other avenues that are part of me. And there's some lovely research by David Lavallee that looked at that career development of finding outlets in life can actually enhance on-field performance. I think it was in rugby league players, for example. And I think sometimes when I've supported athletes that are just super obsessive about one thing, about that I've got to perform this training set, and if I don't, then that will mean I won't qualify or I won't go to the next level or I won't get selected. And actually one of the requirements, even though I might be talking training with them, I might be to say, right, go and do some colouring or go to the cinema or go and get a pizza, which is stepping them out of that and giving them something else to do, almost like this is my instruction for you to go and do something else and forget about this sporting world. But you sound like you have a contracting with Aston where he can draw you the other way to say, hang on, you need to go back and focus on sport.
Yeah, and again, it's that idea of balance, and I actually think it's a performance detriment when everything about your life, your entire hope for validation, rests on a single performance. Like, it's just too much. It's unnatural. You lose that perspective, and I think in many ways you lose the freedom to go out and perform because you're too scared of not performing or what you're going to lose. And so I think probably the reason why Aston, is so positive towards positive distractions is because he knows ultimately it's a performance enhancement. And equally, I've had experiences. My career has been almost 12 years now. You will experience injury. And one of the things I always encourage young athletes to do is, right now, yeah, you're healthy, that's great. But right now, write out a list of all the things that you're going to do when you experience a period of injury, when you have this 3-week period. What can you do? And actually, a lot of the best, my broadcasting career started because I prolapsed a disc and I had 6 months and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And I applied to be BBC had this great program called the BBC Kickoff Sports Reporter. And so I did that for 8 weeks and ended up getting a job off the back of it. And so a lot of these positive distractions actually came about because I had a block of time due to injury I wasn't expecting and just thought, well, I can sit at home and watch Netflix, which is actually sometimes the best thing to do, or I can have a bit of an explore and see what else is out there.
I love that as a tactic of being able to park it as well. I think I might go and do this, but maybe you think now's not the time. I'll go and park it somewhere and go and revisit that box and tell my future self what to get up to when it's not the right time. Wow. Okay. So I'm really conscious that I can ask you questions all day, but I've got a couple more about what are your goals and hopes and ambitions for Tokyo, and I'd also like to ask you about the role in terms of governance and your thinking around that. So what are your hopes for Tokyo? Where are you? Where's your head at? Obviously, there's a change in time. Rather than it just being in a few weeks, you've now got over a year. And does that change your goals, or does that, or do you maintain your goals and just refocus about how you're going to do it?
I think, well, actually, for me, like I said, it would be different for everybody. I was actually just coming off of quite a scary and potentially career-ending injury. So when it was announced, I was back into full training. I'd had some great testing, and actually we knew, yes, I will be ready for Tokyo. But now I have some buffer time. So in many ways, it kind of just gives me a little bit of space. It's no longer just about getting back to full fitness and peak. Now we have time to add a few bells and whistles. So that's quite nice. But in terms of my goals, so in Beijing, I won a bronze medal. In London, I won a silver. And then in Rio, for me, the fairy tale ending was I was going to win a gold. What a nice little sequence, and that would be it. And it did not. I got a silver, and that was, it was tough. And the reality was, I jumped really well. I jumped the best that I ever had. Someone just jumped better, and it was frustrating, and there was nothing that I could do about it. And I knew Aston was proud and he was happy, but it was just a really hard thing to swallow. And I had to just really think, how I felt about this. Was there anything else? Is there anything else I could do to jump farther? And I gave myself some time. But honestly, yeah, I just thought, you know what? I don't feel like I have jumped that incredible jump. I'm not going to say perfect jump because I don't think it exists, but just that jump where I look at it and just think, wow, that felt amazing. And I cannot do better than that. I haven't had that moment yet where I think, okay, now I can walk away knowing that I've done everything and experienced everything. So I then recommitted to Tokyo. And it's been a pretty tumultuous 4 years, only because I just thought, look, when you're, I'm at the end of my career now. And, as you'll know from your work, to find big gains when you've already gotten to the point of maximizing your potential, it's incredibly difficult. And so we just tried everything. And performances were up and down and up and down, but that's sometimes just what experimentation looks like. But we do feel now like we're at a place where we're pretty set in terms of what we're going to do. And we are just going to, as I say, I'm going for the gold. I would love to finish my career on a gold. But equally, as Aston has always warned me, it's never, if I say that I want to win a gold medal, that is not a goal that's dependent on my performance. It's dependent also on other people's performance. So anyone listening, that's a terrible goal. And so what I need to do, what I've learned to do, is just sort of refocus and set a goal for me that's dependent solely on me. So that is what Tokyo is going to be about. And this next lead up is just making sure that I will be able to look at myself in the mirror after that final, regardless of the result, and just say, I did everything. I'm satisfied. Which is actually one of the toughest goals to set, because you have to be so honest with yourself in order to assess that. I've forgotten the other part of the question.
No, well, I think you've answered it fully in that sense of it not being an outcome. I politely hedged my answer about the bronze, the silver, and the missing bit. And having spoken to Catherine Granger, who I supported through her early career, of 4 silver medals, and ultimately that could have been her story. And then she ended up getting a gold medal in the middle there. So it's about that feeling of incompleteness based on the outcome, as opposed to what you're talking about there is how will it feel? What will I have done? That no stone unturned, a process approach of feeling I'm content with the effort that I've put in to my endeavours, regardless of where I stand at the end of the competition.
Yeah, and I think I realised, so Rio, it was tough, and I was devastated. I was upset. I mean, obviously, silver is a great result, and eventually you end up be happy with that. But I think what I realized was in the middle of that huge disappointment. I asked myself the question: from 2012 onwards, had I known the end from the beginning, would I have still chosen to take that journey, knowing it was going to end like this? And the answer was honestly yes. Because as you say, the prize, it never is that gold medal in the end. It's the person you've become on that road. Like, that is what you will take with you. I mean, I've got medals. They're in a closet somewhere. I don't, they're not out. They're not that important. You think they're going to be, and you think you're going to love them and look at them all day. And it's just not the way it is. Yeah, they're cool for a couple days, and you take them to schools and people get really excited about them. But actually, the prize, what matters is how you've changed and who you've become.
Wow, got goosebumps listening to that. And that's just so important for people to hear and understand, because the eyes on the prize as a phrase is so intoxicating and it's so catchy, but ultimately it's not what it gives you. There's so many people feeling relief after winning a gold medal, or sitting back in their apartment in the village thinking, right, what next? You've got to be content with what you've already taken from it before the results get declared. Wow. Okay, and so maybe this is too much of a step change, actually, for hearing about your inspirational thoughts about performance to sitting on governing bodies and so on. But tell me about your motivations to be part of a team that steers your home body or your governing body.
I think so. It actually started back in 2017 when I was invited to be part of the board of directors for the committee that helped organize the World Championships, and I was asked to do it. I was terrified, which immediately made me more interested. And so,
7 days to get over it.
So I did a little bit more research, and it was actually a great challenge and learning process for me to learn how to really form and think through opinions that I was then confident enough in to voice and to stand by. and to watch decisions happen and things get changed. I think it's just, it's so easy to, sit back and criticize and say why what people are doing is silly. I didn't think about this. And it's a totally different thing to now take on responsibility and accountability for those decisions and make them happen. And I wanted to learn what that was like. And I felt like, I don't know, it's weird. On the one hand, I just felt like I have nothing to say, anything that I think is not going to be important. And then actually realizing, I have a huge amount of experience. I have a voice, and I need to use it. And it's really intimidating walking into a boardroom of people that are far more senior than you, people that have had far more experience in terms of, accounting and game management and marketing and communication and all those things, and to stand up and say what you think and believe in what you said. And that was a great learning experience. I'm so happy to be able to say truthfully that I felt so welcome from the moment that, I stepped into that avenue. I know there are so many conversations going on right now about the roles of female in leadership positions and how we need to have more of those in the sport and how it may not be the most welcoming place. And I'm sure all of those things are true. But equally, what I experienced, for example, was, there would be scenarios when I had to weigh in on accounting decisions, and I'd be going through the accounts and I had no idea. I'm like, how am I supposed to give an opinion when I have no idea what these things mean? And, someone driving to meet me in Loughborough to go through and explain everything to ensure I was up to speed, because it was that important to them that I was able to participate fully and they wanted to know what I thought. So my experience was hugely positive, and I welcome anybody, male, female, everybody, to get involved in governance and give it a go. And learn about it, because our sport will be better the more that people from every single tier of the sport understand what is going on at the top and understanding the process of how to make a change. Obviously, becoming vice president for the UK Members Council at British Athletics was another step up, and that has been a huge challenge. And I'm learning constantly, but again, I am loving it, and I'm loving having the ability to get involved and take responsibility and really understand the process of making things change. It's hard. It is unbelievably hard, but it is an incredible thing to learn how to do and to watch people who do it well.
Mm. And do you have a number of hats that you wear, or do you have a collection of hats that you wear at the same time? Do you sort of say, I put my athlete hat on, I put my para hat on, or I put my female athlete para hat on, as well as thinking about because obviously athletics is in a place where there are things to be improved. You're thinking about the future position of the sport, where it's going to be at, how it can develop, how it can prevent some of the difficulties it's encountered recently.
Yes, of course. And exactly what you say about hats. Actually, I'm not sure I've ever had a vice president who's also been a competing athlete, which has its challenges, but actually has huge benefits too, because I'm fully integrated into so many different networks and can easily draw on different perspectives and engage different people. So that has been a huge plus. And again, that's part of the reason why I took the job. I think, I say job, it's a volunteer position, as are most things in athletics, which again demonstrates the commitment and passion people have, but also the need for it to professionalize, for sure. But I think the skill set that I have is probably, very different and very unique. And I'm excited to see where that can fit in and how it can help.
Amazing. Can I ask you one more question?
Of course you can.
What is going to scare you next? So what's coming up? What are you parking perhaps beyond your career that's going to make you a little bit excited and scared enough to think, yeah, you know what, I'd give that a go?
It's funny, I kind of have, so every year I like to pick at least one thing that I find, just super terrifying. And, 1 year it was doing this film, 1 year it was Masterchef. In 2019, it was actually going to Nepal with the leprosy mission and hosting a huge social media fundraising drive for a hospital, a leprosy hospital that had been hit by the earthquake in 2015. I'm not quite sure actually about 2020. It looks really different now from what I thought that it would look like. Taking on the vice presidency role has kind of ended up being that one, but it's not something I plan. I think it just kind of it happens, and the more that you say yes to things, or just in little ways in everyday life, taking opportunities, whether that's having a conversation with someone new, just say yes, and you'd be amazed at what comes your way. So I don't yet know for certain, but we'll see. I mean, I'm open.
Okay. All right. Well, if anyone's listening they know where to find you. Look, Stef, I've taken so much from this conversation. I'm so thankful for connecting with you today. And it's such a shame that we're separated via the webinar. I know that we're only 13 minutes away from down the road, but you've so much energy and depth of thought, but what you've experienced, but also how much benefit that people can gain from this. I think probably zest is the right word. And I know for sure that to coin Aston's phrase, you're going to be a real positive distraction for people as they're focusing on what they're focusing at the moment and listening to what you've had to say. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been brilliant. I really enjoyed it.